What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice here, guys. Derek and Cody with you as always. Guys, we just saw the Colts lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Cody, I think everyone's thinking about it at this point, and it's kind of needing some addressing. And the sad part is, we were talking about the other day how Jonathan Taylor pretty much had no leverage going into this season when it came to contract talks. But after watching what just happened in Indianapolis, I think everyone is saying that Jonathan Taylor's little bit of leverage is finally showing itself after the Indianapolis Colts failed to even average 2.5 yards a carry from the running back position. Now, granted, again, this is the first start for Anthony Richardson. A lot of guys are up close in the box, and we were without our top two running backs in this game. But needless to say, Cody, Jonathan Taylor had to be sitting there and saying, man, don't y'all wish you had me right now?
Yeah, well, that is if he was healthy, which he's not still. But yeah, I think you're right. This maybe gets a little bit more leverage. I know you talked about this in the recap, but gosh, watching Deion Jackson makes it pretty apparent that the Colts need JT and his services sooner rather than later. Again, like we talked about, the Colts were down to really their third running back, and they even lost, if you want to consider Evan Hall the third running back, they're even down to their fourth running back. I think he probably should be the fourth best running back on this roster after how he played. It wasn't good at all. The Colts were not able to run the football at all. I thought they had some moments with Evan Hall, so maybe that, you think when you get Zach Moss back, maybe this will get a little bit better. But still, it couldn't have gotten much worse than it was against Jacksonville on Sunday, and the Colts definitely need to, address it in certain ways. And I know there are some running backs out there for sure when it comes to it, but this is definitely a situation, Derek, where the Colts have an issue very clearly on their offense, and they cannot afford to be very one-dimensional at this point and not be able to run the football, because if they are, then it's just going to put all the pressure on Richardson, right? And that was a big thing that we talked about with the advantage of having Jonathan Taylor is he could take that pressure off of Anthony Richardson early. And with Jonathan Taylor having to sit out the first 4 games, and also who knows beyond that, I think it's imperative now, if it wasn't already, that the Colts need to figure out something with Jonathan Taylor. They need to come to an agreement. They need to mend this relationship, because they both need each other, especially Anthony Richardson and the Colts. They need a player like Jonathan Taylor's caliber to figure out this running offense, because they can't afford to do what they just did against Jacksonville all year. It won't happen.
Yeah, it's one of those situations. We know that the offensive line was definitely not in a good situation right here in this game. They, it was so hard to watch it, because on top of just not being able to run the football, you also didn't have really any running backs that really opened some things up for you in the passing game either. Even though Jonathan Taylor doesn't always do that, Jonathan Taylor definitely has that big play ability that you're craving for. But I think it's just safe to say what the situation is right now, Cody. And after this week, every team that faces the Indianapolis Colts moving forward is now thinking, okay, so we know Indianapolis can't run the football. They're not going to be able to. They can't match with us one-on-one. They clearly can't move defenders up front. They clearly can't devise schemes well enough to be able to block our guys. If we just constantly bring pressure, then more times than not, we're going to take advantage of the Indianapolis Colts, because they're just incapable of making that big play. And of course, like I said, the offensive line is a lot to do with that. But at the same time, we don't have a guy right now that when it's mano-a-mano, when it's 1v1 and you need to break a tackle in order to make a big play happen out of nothing, we don't have someone like that right now that can do that. And Jonathan Taylor was and probably is the only guy on this roster that would actually be able to do that. So that's going to be the big question is, are we going to, if we saw that Jonathan Taylor is very close to passing a physical. They even said that, he's supposed to get tested with either in the next like 48 hours, and he's most likely going to pass the physical, but he's already been placed on the IR, so they can't play him until week 5. But the big question is, again, does Jonathan Taylor even want to play for the Indianapolis Colts when it comes back? Because now he knows that he does have a little bit of leverage and could stick it to him even more if a few more weeks go by and Indianapolis can't run the football still.
Yep, exactly. As the weeks go on, if it continues to be an issue, I think it even puts more pressure on you. Like, well, nobody else can run it effectively, and you have your star running back just sitting there, and you need to figure something out. Like, I don't care if you don't play running backs. If you're not going to help Anthony Richardson out and you have the opportunity to do so by just fixing that relationship, then like you got to do everything you can outside of compromising, where you stand on certain ways. Like you got to figure out and come to a middle ground somewhere. I think you have to. Because you can't afford. He's 24 years old, one of the better running backs when he's healthy. Like you can't just afford to have him sit on the sidelines. Like you just can't at this point. If he's healthy and ready to go, Anthony Richardson needs it, and certainly this Colts offense needs it from what we saw in week 1 because it was bad, man. And again, we will get a better picture of this, Derek, when Zach Moss returns, and then if Evan Hall is able to return soon, like we'll get a better indication. Was this just a week 1 fluke? Because things happen all the time where it's week 1 flukes, or is this an ongoing issue that's, coming over from last year? It's a consistent thing. Because if it is, then yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor continues to get leverage with each passing week if that's the case.
Yeah. And then, of course, if you're Jonathan Taylor and you do still sit out and the Indianapolis Colts still need to figure out a situation, how important do you think it is that Indianapolis brings in even right now, like even say this week, even if they think Zach Moss is coming back, that do you think that Indy should be in a hurry to sign a veteran running back that could actually get something going, like a Kareem Hunt or something like that, to make it to where they can get something going with rushing the football?
I almost think they have to, with just due to the fact that you had 2 running backs for the majority of this game. Again, if Zach Moss returns 3, but like, dude, to be honest, you don't want Deion Jackson touching the field after what you saw on Sunday. Like, you just don't at this point. Like, there's no reason to give him any more carries if that's the result he's going to show you. And that might be harsh, but like at the end of the day, like if you don't play well, your spot should not be just granted. You shouldn't just be given that spot. So I think you should bring in some competition, certainly, for that starting running back reps. I mean, I would feel a lot better if you brought in, say, a Kareem Hunt or a James Robinson or somebody like that, that could, split carries with Zach Moss until Jonathan Taylor returns. I think you feel a little bit better then that you have more of that veteran guy in there because, that way you have really 2 backs that you feel pretty comfortable with. And if Jonathan Taylor comes back, then you have 3 guys that you feel really good in rotation. And then when Evan Hall, whenever he comes back, then you have pretty good depth. So I think it's definitely something the Colts have to do at this point. I think they've been mulling it for a while, but I think they have to pull the trigger now after what you saw. And again, Derek, it can't get much worse than it was on Sunday with the running backs and just the running game in general.
Yep, it's clearly a bad situation for the Indianapolis Colts. And if you're Jonathan Taylor, you're sitting back saying that this definitely gives me a little bit more of an edge in my talks, but clearly we know that the Colts still don't have to do anything when it comes to Jonathan Taylor. We'll see what happens, but nevertheless, definitely a bad situation for the Indianapolis Colts. If they want to have any chance of winning some more games this year, they're 100% going to have to figure out how to run the football. And clearly, losing Jonathan Taylor definitely is not going to make it much better. But we'll see how this goes. It's only been 1 week. And like I said, a lot of it also had to do with the fact that the offensive line was terrible in this game. We'll see how that progresses. But in the meantime, let us know your thoughts, guys. Do you think that this gives Jonathan Taylor more leverage in a contract extension? Or what do you all think is going to happen for that situation? Do the Indianapolis Colts need to bring in someone right away, or do you just roll with the few guys that you do have? But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let us know your thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.